Hello, this is Jordan Lake, and welcome to the advanced portion of this series. Now, this section is going to dive a little deeper into advanced techniques to bring your photos to the next level, and it won't always be something more complex than what Matthew has done in his videos. Perhaps it'll be a better or a deeper explanation of a technique or tool that he used, but in any case, it will be more advanced. Now, for this week's episode, I've chosen Christina Ladinsky's photo. Now, Christina, please don't take anything I say personally. I didn't choose your photo to pick on you or to insinuate that you're a bad photographer. Um, I chose your photo because it is, in fact, a great photo and has the potential to be an even greater photo. So I'd like to pass on some things that I've learned that maybe can help you. Before we get into the edit, I want to talk a little bit about a concept that I learned a long time ago. And the phrase I like to use is what you see is what you get. And the basic premise of it is that any edit you make to a photo, no matter how small it may be, is going to contribute to the final photo you see. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but incidentally, it did. But basically, we don't want to skip over the small details thinking they're unimportant. And I'll be covering this more in the series as we go along. Whenever you hear me say what you see is what you get, you'll know that that's what I'm referring to. And it's a big thing. It can take a photo from looking dirty or unorganized, and you might not know why, to a photo that's clean and crisp and has your viewer looking exactly where you want him or her to look. So let's do a quick review, an overview of what we're going to do to the photo. We're going to fix the slant of this photo. It seems to be slanted maybe a couple degrees counterclockwise. And I'm going to dive into evaluating it, figuring out how I got to that conclusion, and then how to fix it, of course. We have some distractions that we're going to remove from the photo. And then we're going to adjust the color of the entire photo. A little bit in the clouds, a little bit in the mountain, and primarily most of the yellows and greens in the bushes and the trees here. So let's dive into the edit. All right, so now we're going to get into fixing the slant of this photo. And this all comes down to visual cues. Even if this photo was taken level from the camera, some cameras have levels inside them. Let's just drag down a guide here and pretend this is the horizon. Even if this photo was level, and let's just say this is the horizon, it's completely level, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What matters are visual cues that tell your viewer what is level, because your viewer doesn't know if you leveled your camera or not. All they know is what they see. And so what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate the visual cues, and we might rotate it. And if I pull a line here, just like this, we can see that there's one visual cue that tells us that there's this horizontal line that isn't completely horizontal. Now, in my mind, I know this is a shoreline, and this doesn't contribute entirely to the photo having to be rotated, because I can kind of understand that we're not perpendicular to the shoreline, but it is a visual cue that we want to keep in mind. The next visual cue, and these are kind of arbitrary points, but I look at these points up here, and it kind of creates how I feel the mountain is sitting. And if I draw a line like this, I can kind of see that, for me, this is kind of how the mountain is tilted. It's tilted a little bit to the left. Now, this is completely arbitrary for me. It might be different for you. You guys out there might be seeing something more like this, and that's okay too. Of course, this is completely arbitrary, but it does lead me to my visual cue. Now, the greatest visual cue that tells me that this photo is slanted a little bit counterclockwise are the people. Every time we see a photo or a drawing, we're always looking for people. And if we find people, it gives us perspective, it gives us size in relationship to objects. And in this photo, I can see all these people down here. And if we draw a line from this person's head to this person's head, we can see everybody's pretty much at the same height, which means that they're all level on the same ground, which means that this line is pretty much level. We can see how it's tilted a little bit or rotated counterclockwise. So what we can, this is easy to fix. What we do is just come up to our crop tool, and we want to make sure that our delete cropped pixels is not checked. And that way, when we rotate this and when we crop it, we aren't going to delete the pixels. We can always just come back and rotate it a little bit more. And I'm going to crop this in just a little bit here. I'm going to crop this in just a little bit here. Now, the reason why we're cropping this first and we're fixing, let's group these, and we're fixing the angle first is because, as you can see, when we cropped it, we got rid of some of the pixels, and those, if we didn't crop it, we'd be fixing or adjusting those pixels in the later edit, and we just don't have to. So I usually like to start off by fixing any angles and getting down my size first. All right, now we're going to remove some of the distractions from the photo. And the biggest distraction for me, obviously, is this tree, or this pole. We'll just call it a tree. It doesn't really lend to the creative aspect of the photo for me. I'm not exactly sure why it's there, and as Matthew and I both mentioned, we weren't really sure if it was a tree or a pole. It was just kind of confusing for us. So it also lends to the visual cues of something being slanted when it isn't slanted. So obviously this is slanted, and it's a major distraction, so we're going to remove that. We're also going to remove these little twigs, which I imagine are coming from the tree. And then we'll jump in and evaluate some other things that might be drawing our attention. Obviously, the mountain is what we want our viewers to be looking at, perhaps the shoreline, some of these reflections. Anything outside of that would be either a distraction or a secondary thing that we want them to look at. So we'll jump into that. So let's get rid of the easiest thing first is these things, these little branches. So what we can do is we've got several tools that we can use. The spot healing brush tool is a really great tool that I use for cleaning up some of the smaller distractions. And I don't have content aware on. I use proximity match for this. You might want to turn, I use proximity match when I'm retouching faces and portraits. And as you can see, it isn't really doing a great job with these clouds because it's proximity match. What we can do is, oops, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to do content aware, and this should be much better. Yeah. So you just keep drawing over the little bits that you don't want in there. And now we're left with these things and these little blips. And that's because we're right at the top. And to get rid of those, what I like to use is the clone stamp tool. And I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. And we're going to Alt or Option click up here. We're going to drag over. We're just going to draw these little buggers out. There we go. So we got rid of those, and now we got to remove this big thing. How do we do that? Well, it's actually quite easy, and sometimes, well, most of the time it's easy. Sometimes it can prove to be a little hairier, but we want to get as close as we can to this object and selecting as many pixels as we can of the object, but we don't want to get any of what we don't want to remove, because that will help the content aware tool realize what we want to keep and what we don't want to keep. So I want to keep some of this guy on the right hand, because I don't want the content aware tool to say or to know that I want to get rid of that guy too. I want to kind of keep some of that. And this is all good stuff here. I want to keep. So I'm going to keep all this. And keep some of this. And I'm just alternating between Alt Option click to remove stuff and Shift click to add to the selection. So if I want to add, I can hit Shift and I can draw out, and now all this stuff in here will be added. And if I want to remove it, I can draw and I can hit Alt and then draw what I want. So all of that is going to be removed from the selection. That's a little bit too close for comfort there. Let's get that. Okay. Zoom out here. Now if we hit Shift F5, this is going to bring up our fill. We're going to make sure that our content aware is checked. And we hit OK. Now this did a really good job filling in the clouds here, and we've got a little bit up here that we'll have to fix this. This is kind of a distraction, this apparent line that goes through here. And then this is okay, but we might want to fix that too. We'll fix that. So let's zoom up here, and we can use our clone stamp tool, and I'll just source from over here. We'll just kind of work this out. And there we go. Just keep sourcing it. Now this pattern here and this pattern here they're too close for me. So I'm just gonna get rid of that pattern. And then down here, I don't like the way that looks, so I'm just gonna clone stamp that out. A little bit too blue for me. I change my opacity to 20%, and I just kind of blend things in here. This color here is kind of odd for me, so I'm gonna fix this. It's a bit too sharp there. So I'm just using the clone stamp tool, and I just keep sourcing, and I just keep drawing. And this right here, I don't like, that's a very sharp, distracting line that shouldn't be there. All right, now we get down to this hot mess. It isn't really too bad other than this sharp line. There's this tree that we might be able to put this tree in here as well. So I'm gonna click the top of the tree, and I'm gonna set my opacity to 100. We can put this tree in right here, and then start hitting the top of these reeds will come down here. And then I'm going to preserve the shoreline, because I like that, and that shows us that it's ending there. And then the reflection should be similar. And that's good for right there. All right, so we fixed that. This I don't like. We can take this whole section and just continue it right on down. So I'll source from here and continue this. And this is a bit blurry here, so I'll get rid of this here. There we go. Now let's evaluate some other things that we can kind of view as distractions. For me, this little thing over here, this umbrella, is kind of a distraction for me because it's very bright and it's at the edge and it draws my eye, and it's something that if this was my photo, I don't want people looking over here. I don't mind if their eye gradually comes over here and they see these stairs and it kind of makes me wonder where it's going. That's fine. I want the viewer to have their eye drawn to this part, and so a highlight in this part of the photo is a distraction. So I'd probably get rid of this, and for that, I'm going to use the clone stamp tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the tree down and get rid of it. Let's see. I think that's pretty good. We won't go too far. I might get rid of this red piece here. I'm not exactly sure what that is. If I had to guess, it's probably like another little umbrella based upon what we have here. And then this is a very, very high contrast hotspot, and I might get rid of that. And to do that, I might do content aware again. So I just kind of go over this whole spot here. I'll do Shift F5 and we'll see what it looks like. It looks pretty good. Content aware is awesome. All right, now we're going to get into fixing and improving the color of this photo. And the first thing, as Matthew and I evaluated in the previous video, is the yellows in the greens. If we can decrease the yellow and bring the green up, that can contribute quite a bit to this photo. And overall, it kind of has a bit of a green cast to it. But what I think I'm going to do first is I'm going to just focus on just the greens here in the bottom portion of the photo. So what I think I'm going to first do is I'm going to add an adjustment layer. I'm going to come down to this little guy down here. I'm going to pick hue and saturation. And for those who don't really work with this kind of a workflow, what I've just added is a hue and saturation layer on top of the whole thing, and it's added in a mask for me, and it's white. So anything that I change in here, I'll be able to see everywhere in the photo. And the way we work with hue and saturation is if I drag this slider left and right, it's you'll notice that it's changing the hue. Put simply, that's what this is doing. So I can change the hue of the colors of everything. So what it's doing, as you can see down the bottom, it's just shifting the color range back and forth for every color. So what was red is now yellow. And if I shift it a little bit more, what was green is now blue. And of course I can change the saturation and the lightness as well. Now I just want to focus on the greens. So what I can do is I can either go to the greens and it selects the range for me, or I can hit this, let's go back up to master. I can hit this little guy and I can pick the color that I want to affect. And you'll notice that the color range that it has chosen is a bit different. And you'll notice that this, in fact, our eye looks at this and it sees green, but Matthew and I saw that it actually had a little bit more of a yellow cast. And as you can see, the colors that it has selected are more between orange and yellow than green. So this really is more of a green color. And to prove that to you, you can come in here and you can actually see how yellow all these colors are. They're very yellow. This is but our eyes play tricks on us and we think it's green. But we need to fix that. Okay, so we've selected the color that we want to adjust, and now what we can do is we can slide this and adjust this and push a little bit more green in. I can take it all the way this way, and we can see how much green we're pushing in. That's too much. We just want to push just a little bit more green in. That's good. And sometimes I like to, this photo, the color in the photo wasn't very saturated. So if I push the saturation too much, it can start to look fake. And I kind of want to match the saturation of the photo, because that's something that we'll fix later on. We don't necessarily have to fix saturation on a color by color basis, but we'll kind of match. I'm just more focused on the color right now. And I might push the lightness down just a bit. And this is different for every single photo. So there is no set. These numbers won't apply to your photo. They only apply to this one because of the colors. All right, so I like the greens. I like that. But remember, we're adjusting the greens and the yellows for everything in the photo, which means that if there were any greens in the water or yellows anywhere else, those have been shifted down. And I only want to affect just the greens in this particular area. So I'm going to come over to my mask, and I'm going to choose a brush, and I'm going to make it rather soft. And I'm going to hit D, which is going to bring up my default colors over here. I want to paint in black. So I want to remove the adjustment layer in these areas. And I like the shoreline being a bit more dark, because it kind of lends to the effect of dirt, rather than like a concrete type shore, which can kind of look kind of fake. So I'm just painting back in some color into here, and I want to paint back in the original color of this, because this little feature here, I like this feature. And I don't want to remove any of the color, because this has got like a stone, rocky type color, and I don't want to push too much green, because it's not an organic thing. It's rock. Get rid of the color cast here. Very good. All right. Paint a little color in there. All right. And now we want to make sure that we don't get rid of any of that color, any of the yellows out of the rock up here. You can kind of see, depending on if you've got this full screen, you can kind of see the color coming back into the mountain there a little bit, which is what we want. Yeah, good. All right. All right, now let's fix some of the greenish overcast to this photo. And what I mean by that is, if we come in and look at this mountain, we have a perfect white color in our photo with the snow. And we have white here, and this is actually a white color here, but because it's in shadow and reflecting the sky, we get this bluish color. In a perfect world, and in perfect colors, this shadow should be gray. But again, it's reflecting the light from all around. It's reflecting light from the sky. It's reflecting light from the trees. It's pulling in all the different color casts, and it's lending to this It's lending to this color, which is kind of a greenish grayish blue. And I suspect actually when I look at this entire photo, I can kind of see that whole kind of color in all of it. It has like a greenish grayish blue cast to it. And all we really need to do is set the white balance color. And to do that, we want to pick what color should be gray. And this is a perfect photo to use it on because we have white in our photo that isn't gray. So this should be gray. We can fix that by going to a curves layer. If we hit our curves, not the mask, we want to hit our curves. We can tell the curves layer what our black is, what our gray is, and what our white is. And if we hit our gray eyedropper, we're going to tell our curves that this color right here is actually gray, and you'll notice how it shifts everything more warmer, and that looks much better to me already. So let's zoom back out. Now the problem with this now is now we've got this color in our clouds. It's like this purplish color. We don't really want that. So what we're going to do is, because we have a mask applied to our levels, we can paint out, or in this case we're going to paint in where we want that to be. So where we want that to be is just on the mountain or on the rocky parts. And so we want it obviously in the mountain, we want it in these little bits back here, and I like the color here and here. We don't want it in the greens because we fixed that already. We just want to fix the mountain and the red. So what we can do is, this adjustment layer is being applied to all of our layer. So we'll hit our mask, and we'll hit Command I, and I'm a Mac, not a PC guy, so whatever it is on, I think it's Control I on PC inverts it for you. We're just inverting the mask so that our curves layer is no longer seen. And now we're going to paint in with our brush with white on our mask where we wanted our curves to be affected. So if we just start painting in here, we'll see it right away. See right away where the difference in color. Let me get a little smaller here. Now this is just a quick tutorial, and like Matthew said, if this was going in, if this is a photo that you were going to put into your portfolio, what you see is what you get. So you're going to want to zoom in and get really close up and get a nice selection. Now you'll notice as I'm painting this, you'll notice how the whites are even shifting a little bit more to the red. And we can fix that. Can use another curves to bring the reds down in the highlights. But this already, just doing this, has really brought out the contrast between the mountain and the foreground, the trees. And I'm going to set my opacity to 20% here just to get behind these trees here. Okay, back to 100. I like this little shape back here. This is really cool. Paint the red back in here. See what the shoreline looks like. Very good. All right, now let's fix the whites on the mountain. Let's make them white, because right now they're kind of shifting more towards the red. They're not. It's not really pure white, but we can fix that. One way to fix it is by zooming in on a large portion of where your highlights are. In this case, I'm going to sample up from this part, and we can use our eyedropper tool, and we're going to say point sample, make sure we're on point sample, all layers. And if we come over to our info palette, or if you go to window info F8, if we hit the shift key, we can drop an eyedropper location, and up in this part of the info palette we can see what our RGB values are. So already we can see that there's more green and red than blue. It's not perfectly white or in grayscale. There's more red in it, which means that we need to bring down our red. We want to make sure our R and our G and our B are at the same level to get a pure grayscale. And the way we do that is with curves. We can do another curves layer, and you can watch these numbers as we adjust the individual levels. So if we go to our red channel, and in the future we'll do another episode and we'll dive into this whole curves window, but basically for this tutorial, our darks are over here and our lights are over here. And we want to work with our lights. So if we take this point and we move it down, we're taking away red from our highlights. If we were to move it to the left up here, we'd be pushing more reds into our highlights. So see how the whites are getting redder? Now watch these numbers as I take this down. Notice how the red is coming down? So let's pick 212. So now we've got our red and our green are matching, and now all we have to do is just bump our blue up. So if we go over to blue, now we don't want to bring the blue down, we want to bring it up. We want to bring it to 212. So we want to push more blues into our whites or into our highlights. And so now you can see our R, our G, and our B values are all at the same level. And if you're into color theory and have a bit of knowledge on color, you'll know that if you have equal parts, at least in light, this isn't in mixing color for paint, but in light, if you have equal colors or equal values in RGB, you get white. And in this case, it's a value of some value of white, which is more along the lines of a gray color. But we have no color cast in our whites. One problem, though, is that we applied it to everything, right? So our curve layer has a mask, and the mask is all white, which means it's everywhere. So if we turn this on or off, it's removing and adding our adjustments to everything. We only want it in our highlights. So how do we do that? Well, if we come into our blending options, or if we double click on an empty part of our layer, we can tell this layer to blend into the layers below. And we don't want this adjustment layer in any of our shadows or our midtones. So what we can do is we can take this slider right here and move it over, and what this will do is it will not allow our adjustment layer into the darks or into the midtones. If you hit Alt or Option, you can actually adjust the fade between the two. We use this quite a bit, so in the future episodes you'll see us use this quite a bit. This particular photo is not the best at showing the extremes of what you can do with this tool. It's very subtle, but this tool will allow you to shift just the adjustments into the highlights, which is what we want. So now you can see just the highlights are turning on and off, and I might push this up just a little bit more. So now if we come in here, we should see we have equal parts of red, green, and blue, which gives us our highlights are not color shifted. The next thing that we can focus on is punching up some of the colors and contrast in the photo. And the way we can do that is with another curves adjustment layer. And there's a few ways that I've seen people do this. And sometimes I like to try different ways. One of the ways that I normally add contrast, and I think Matthew did it in his previous videos, he took the dark areas, so this would be the dark areas and these would be the light areas. He took the dark areas and darkened them a little bit, and then he took the light areas and lightened them a little bit, and a variation thereof, and that you can see that already kind of removes a haze, like a grayish haze from the photo, and punches the colors up. That's one way to do it. That's the way I usually do it. Another way that you might like to try, it's a little less scary if you're not sure how this works. You can hit the little hand tool and you can actually point at the areas where you'd like to increase or decrease the value. So in this case, this cloud's a bit dark, and you'll notice if you watch over here, there's a little circle that moves up and down this line to show you where the point is going to be added. So as I move over, you can see how there's a little circle that shows if I were to click, it's going to add a point there, and then we can drag it up. And that's the actual value that we're increasing the value just for those values in the entire photo. So we bring this up just a little bit, and then maybe in our shadows down here, we want to bring those down just a little bit. And as you can see, as I move across the image, we're just selecting values. It doesn't have anything to do with color, but values on a grayscale. So that's why I can come over here, and this is green, and I can come up here, and this is rather red, and it's about this in the same area. That's because the value between here and here is about the same. So again, what we're doing is we're selecting values. So let's see, what else can we play with? Let's give this a little pump here. Increase the curve in the highlights, really makes our sky come out. So that kind of gives us a little bit of a better contrast, going from more of a grayish overcast or haze to pumping up the highlights. One of the other distracting parts of this photo is that some of the trees don't have all of their leaves, or at least that's what it looks like. And so we've got real bright highlights on these trees here, and they create these white hot spots. And it kind of makes it look like the trees are barren, maybe at the end or start of a season. And we can fix that. We can draw the viewer's attention away from that and have those trees kind of blend back into what's behind them. And we can do that by bringing down, we can bring down our highlights, and we can also bring down our midtones. So the highlights come down, the midtones come down, and we're going to come to our mask, and we're going to hit Command-Control-I to invert it. And we're going to grab a brush, and our brush is going to be, let's see here, so you can see. If you hit on the Mac, if you hit Control or Alt and Option, you can bring up this little dialog for your brush. And if you sweep right, it increases the size, and left decreases. And then if you drag up, it decreases the hardness, and if you drag down, it increases the hardness. So if you're wondering, how is he doing that? That's what I'm doing. So let me get my brush, very soft, and I'm going to hit 2 so I can have my opacity at 20%. And I'm just going to start painting in over the areas that are a bit too bright for me. And they're going to start blending in to the back from what's ever behind them. So the highlights and the midtones are going to start coming down, and it's going to start blending in. And these really bright highlight distractions are just going to blend right into the background, and it's going to look so much better. You aren't even going to notice that they're there. And even already I'm loving it. It's really, we're almost done. I might add in some contrast into some other areas, and this is just artistic, so I'm kind of just shaping the trees here, adding a bit more visual contrast. Kind of like, sometimes I like the edges a bit darker, so that your eye is drawn more to the center. And I'm going to add in just a bit of shadow here, because this is, I can't really tell what's going on in this area, and I kind of want a little bit more shadow, a little bit more value in there. I might even add another curves layer and pump up the midtones and highlights. I'm going to invert the mask, and then I can actually draw in as if the light was coming in. And hitting the sides of these trees. So if I group these together then, before and an after, it really adds an extra level of dimension to the photo, and it gets, I mean, if I turn these on and off real quick, you can see the real white, bright highlights that we've taken out. We added in a little bit more dimension so we can see the individual trees. So for the final adjustment that we're going to make to this photo is, I want to draw the viewer's eyes more towards the center. And at 100% it looks pretty good, but in a thumbnail view up here, you can tell that it's a bit dark in the center. So I want to increase brightness kind of in this area, this middle tree area, and in the lower mountain area. We can do that by, you guessed it, another curves layer, and we're going to just bring up the midtones ever so slightly. I'm going to keep the darks. Sometimes when you bring up the midtones, the darks become not as dark, so I might drag the darks over just a little bit. Yeah, just like that. So we bring up our midtones, and then we drag our darks over just a little bit. Come back to our mask, make sure we select our mask, and we're going to invert it, which is Command I, and because I'm in a dialogue, you just hit this. Command or Control I. And so now our curves layer is not affecting anything. I'm going to make sure we're on our mask. And we're going to take our brush, and my opacity is at 20%, which is good, and I have 0 hardness. And I'm just going to come in here, and I'm just going to start painting in some of the darker areas where I want to draw this might be just a little too dark for me. Draw the viewer's attention right to the center here. Another way to do this is drawing a vignette, a slight vignette around the edges. it can look kind of funny when you have a sky in there, because usually when we view the sky, we don't see vignettes coming over the sky and the ground. So in this case, I'm pumping up just where I want the viewer to look. Instead of creating a vignette around the edge, I'm bringing up the values in the center. And as an example, I'll show you why it can look kind of funny. I'll do the opposite. I'll bring down a curves layer and I'll invert this, and then I'll just take my brush. And so if we start drawing in, we can see it just starts to look kind of funny when our vignette goes over our ground and our sky. It just kind of, just a bit odd looking. So that's why if I have a foreground and I have a sky, I am very judicious on if I tend to do that or I don't. In this case, I opted not to do it. I would just increase the brightness in the center there. So let's take a look at, to create a snapshot here. Let's take a look at our before and after. We have our before. You can see how green and yellow it really was. And our after, we just straightened it, got rid of the distractions, increased the color. Thank you so much, Christina, for submitting the photo. It's a great photo, has a lot of potential. And that takes care of it for this week. Thank you.
Alright everyone, thanks for watching our first episode. We hope that you learned some new tips and tricks that you can use on your photographs. Follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/thetimetoSpacephotography. Check out my website at thetimetoSpace.com. And check out Jordan's website at jordanlake.com. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.